Waitress placing a plate on the table. His smirk, her trembling hands, but tonight, one waitress dared to stand up to him. He slams the table. Dishes rattle. People stare. Ethan, angrily, show some respect when you serve me. Nina, calmly, respect isn't demanded, sir. It's earned. Crowd gasps. The restaurant freezes. His smug smile fades in that one moment. The billionaire who controlled everything lost control of himself. Billionaire humiliated in public. Waitress stands up for herself. The video went viral. The city cheered, and for the first time, Ethan Ward felt the weight of his own arrogance. Ethan Ward, billionaire investor and ruthless dealmaker, was a man who ruled through fear. He'd built his empire by crushing competitors, and that attitude followed him everywhere, even into restaurants. When his black Bentley stopped at the entrance, everyone inside seemed to hold their breath. At the back of the room, Nina Clark tied her apron and glanced nervously at the clock. She was only a month into this job, still learning the rhythm of the place. She'd worked in smaller cafes before, but the Sterling Crown was different. Here, one mistake could cost your job, especially on a night like this. Her manager, Daniel Pierce, appeared beside her, anxiety written all over his face. "Nina, I need you to handle table 7 tonight." Nina blinked. "Isn't that—" "Yes," Daniel cut in. "Ethan Ward. Everyone else is conveniently busy." Her heart sank. "Sir, I'm still new. What if I mess something up?" He gave a helpless smile. "Then I'll handle it. Just stay polite, keep calm, and whatever happens, don't argue." Nina took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the table that everyone avoided. Ethan Ward sat surrounded by 3 men in tailored suits, each hanging on his every word. His presence dominated the room, the kind of authority born not of kindness, but intimidation. He didn't smile when she arrived. "Good evening, gentlemen," Nina began softly. "My name is Nina, and I'll be serving you tonight." Ethan's eyes lifted lazily to her face, then down to her name tag. "New?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she replied, steadying her voice. He smirked. "You look nervous." "I just want to make sure your experience is perfect, sir." He leaned back, clearly entertained. "You hear that, Marcus? The new girl thinks she can make me happy. That's ambitious." The men chuckled. Nina's cheeks flushed, but she smiled faintly and asked for their orders. She kept her tone respectful, even when his mockery continued. She'd learned long ago. Dignity wasn't about staying silent. It was about choosing how to respond. When she returned with the appetizers, Ethan deliberately shifted his glass, causing wine to spill across the table. "Unbelievable," he barked. "Can't you watch what you're doing?" The restaurant fell silent. All eyes turned to Nina. Her hands trembled slightly, but she stood still. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quietly, "but your glass moved before I reached it." His eyes narrowed. "Are you saying it's my fault?" "I'm saying it was an accident," she replied. "No one's fault." One of the businessmen stifled a nervous laugh. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Nina's voice didn't waver. "A man who deserves the same respect he gives." Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Even Daniel froze in place, terrified. Ethan leaned forward, rage flickering in his eyes. "Excuse me?" he hissed. Nina didn't back down. "Respect isn't demanded, sir," she said, her tone calm but firm. "It's earned." For the first time that evening, Ethan Ward said nothing. The silence was thick, stretching across the room. Marcus Hale, sitting beside him, looked down to hide his smirk. Ethan's eyes darted around the restaurant, dozens of people watching. Not with admiration, but judgment. The great Ethan Ward, silenced by a waitress. Finally, he pushed his chair back. "We're leaving." He threw a few bills onto the table and stormed out, his entourage trailing behind him. As the door closed, a wave of stunned quiet filled the restaurant. Then, from somewhere near the bar, a single clap, then another. Within seconds, the whole room was applauding softly, for Nina. Her hands shook, but she stood tall. She might lose her job tonight, but something far greater had awakened inside her, her self-respect. Daniel approached her slowly, eyes wide. "Nina, I've worked here 10 years. No one's ever talked to him like that." Nina smiled gently. Maybe it's time someone did. She didn't yet realize it, but that single moment, her calm defiance, would echo far beyond the walls of the Sterling Crown. Because in a city that bowed to money, one woman had just reminded them all that dignity was priceless. The morning after the confrontation, the city was already buzzing, and so was the Sterling Crown. Word traveled fast in New York, especially when it involved Ethan Ward. By the time the staff arrived, everyone was whispering about what had happened the night before. She stood up to him. He just walked out, That girl's crazy or brave. For Nina Clark, it was a blur. She'd barely slept, replaying the scene in her mind. The anger in Ethan's eyes, the applause afterward, the manager's stunned expression, all of it looped endlessly. As she tied her apron that morning, a single thought haunted her. What if I get fired today? Manager Daniel Pierce approached her quietly. His face was pale. Nina, I just got a call from corporate. Ethan Ward complained directly to the owner. Nina's heart dropped. What did he say? That you disrespected a valued client and caused a scene, Daniel replied. He wants you gone by noon. Nina swallowed hard, but her voice was steady. And what do you think, Mr. Pierce? Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. I think you were right, but he's Ethan Ward. His donations, his reputation, he owns half the people in this city. I understand, she said softly. If I have to go, I'll go with my head up. Daniel looked at her, guilt flooding his face. I'll try to talk to the owner, but just be ready. By midday, the restaurant's atmosphere shifted again. The door opened, and in walked Marcus Hale, Ethan's longtime business partner, the same man who had sat quietly at the table the night before. He wasn't there for lunch. He asked for Nina. Daniel hesitated but finally called her from the kitchen. When Nina stepped out, Marcus rose, giving her a surprisingly kind smile. You're braver than most people I know, he said. Do you have a minute? They sat at a corner booth. Marcus leaned forward. Ethan didn't sleep last night. He's furious. Said you humiliated him in front of investors. He's planning to sue the restaurant for emotional distress. Nina's eyes widened. Sue? For what? Speaking the truth? Marcus chuckled softly. Exactly. That's why I came. Between you and me, Ethan Ward has humiliated hundreds of people, but no one ever talks back. What you did, that rattled him. Nina shook her head. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. I just refused to be treated like dirt. Marcus finished. I know. Believe me, I've wanted to say the same words for years. He leaned back, studying her. You know, people like Ethan are terrified of one thing, public opinion. He builds his image on fear and control. The moment someone stands up, his illusion cracks. Nina frowned. Then why tell me all this? Marcus smiled faintly. Because you might need someone on your side soon. At that moment, Daniel hurried over, face tense. Nina, you're needed in the office. She followed him into the manager's room, where a middle-aged man in a designer suit stood waiting. The restaurant's owner, Mr. Langston. He gestured toward the chair. Sit down, Miss Clark. Her hands clenched in her lap. Yes, sir. I've received a complaint from Mr. Ethan Ward, he began coldly. He claims you spoke to him disrespectfully, embarrassed him and disrupted our dining environment. Is that true? Nina lifted her chin. I spoke to him respectfully, sir. But I also stood my ground when he insulted me. Langston's eyes narrowed. You're new here. Do you realize what kind of client Mr. Ward is? He's been dining here for a decade. His network alone keeps this restaurant relevant. I understand, Nina said calmly, but respect shouldn't depend on someone's bank account. Daniel tried to interject. Sir, I was there. She handled herself with grace. But Langston raised a hand to silence him. Enough, Langston said sharply. You're suspended until further notice. Go home. We'll contact you once the situation is resolved. The words hit like a slap. Nina stood up, forcing herself not to cry. Thank you for the opportunity, she said quietly, and walked out with her dignity intact. Outside, the cold wind hit her face as she stepped onto Fifth Avenue. She exhaled shakily, her heart heavy. She'd stood up for herself, and now she was paying for it that evening. Ethan Ward sat in his penthouse overlooking the city, scrolling through news articles on his tablet. His anger was fading into discomfort. One headline caught his eye. Billionaire berates waitress. Witnesses say she stood tall. Below it were comments from people who'd been at the Sterling Crown that night. I saw it. The girl didn't raise her voice once. She was amazing. Finally, someone put Ethan Ward in his place. His jaw tightened. How had this gotten out? He tossed the tablet aside, pacing. Marcus, he muttered under his breath. You were there. You didn't say a word, did you? But Marcus wasn't answering calls. For the first time in years, Ethan Ward, the man everyone feared, felt something unfamiliar gnawing at him. It wasn't anger. It was shame. The story spread like wildfire. Within 2 days, the Sterling Crown incident had become one of the most discussed topics in the city. Customers had filmed the confrontation. A short, shaky video showing Nina Clark standing tall before Ethan Ward, calm and fearless. It began circulating on social media, shared under hashtags like #RespectIsEarned and #StandUpToPower. The footage didn't show everything, but it was enough. Ethan's angry tone, the mocking laughter from his guests, and Nina's final line, "Respect isn't demanded, sir. It's earned." The internet loved her. By the time Nina woke up that morning, her phone was vibrating non-stop. Messages flooded in, from strangers, old friends, even journalists. "You're trending, Nina," her best friend texted. "People are calling you the waitress who spoke truth to power." Still half asleep, Nina blinked in disbelief. She opened one of the links and saw her own face on a local news segment. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Oh my God." Downstairs, her mother, Evelyn, called out weakly from the kitchen, "Nina, honey, the neighbor just came by. He says you're on the news." Nina hurried down, her heart pounding. On the small TV screen, a reporter stood in front of the Sterling Crown. Last night's confrontation between billionaire investor Ethan Ward and waitress Nina Clark has sparked nationwide conversation about respect and power dynamics in the workplace. Evelyn turned to her daughter with proud, teary eyes. "You didn't just stand up for yourself, baby. You stood up for every working woman who's been made to feel small." Nina smiled faintly, but fear lingered in her chest. "Mom, what if this gets worse? What if he really sues?" Her mother squeezed her hand. "Then you'll face him again, with your head high, just like before." Across town, Ethan Ward's office felt like a war zone. His PR team crowded around a long glass table, bombarded with calls from angry clients and reporters. Screens on the walls displayed headlines from every major outlet. "Billionaire berates waitress, public outrage grows." Has Ethan Ward finally gone too far? Ethan stood at the head of the room, silent but seething. He had spent years crafting an image of control, and now a single waitress had shattered it in 40 seconds of video. His assistant whispered, "Sir, maybe a statement." "Silence," Ethan snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "You think I'll apologize to a waitress?" Marcus Hale, leaning back with a faint smile, spoke for the first time. "Maybe not to her, Ethan, but to the world, you might have to." Ethan glared at him. "You enjoying this?" Marcus shrugged. "I'm just saying, people love a redemption story. Right now, you're the villain, and she's America's sweetheart." Ethan turned away, staring out at the skyline. Then maybe it's time the world saw who she really is. 2 days later, a luxury SUV stopped outside Nina's apartment. A man in a tailored suit stepped out and knocked on her door. "Nina Clark? Yes?" He handed her a sleek black envelope. "Mr. Ethan Ward would like to meet with you privately, to resolve misunderstandings." Her heart skipped. "He wants to meet me," the man nodded. "At the Sterling Crown. Tonight, 7 p.m. When he left, Nina stood frozen. Part of her wanted to refuse. Another part whispered that maybe this was her chance to end things peacefully. That evening, she put on her cleanest uniform, the same one she'd worn that fateful night, and walked through the restaurant's double doors once again. The staff stared, whispering. At table 7 sat Ethan Ward, alone this time. No bodyguards, no entourage, just him, his cold eyes watching her approach. "Nina," he said calmly, motioning for her to sit. "You've caused quite the storm." She sat across from him, keeping her posture straight. "I didn't mean to. I was just doing my job." He smirked faintly. "You humiliated me in front of the city." "I spoke the truth," she said quietly. For a moment, silence filled the space. Ethan's arrogance faltered, replaced by something almost human. "Do you have any idea what it's like to lose everything you've built because of a single video?" Nina met his gaze. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be treated like nothing by people who think they own the world?" The words hit harder than she intended. Ethan looked away. Finally, he said, "You're stronger than I thought." Nina stood up. "Strength isn't loud, Mr. Ward. Sometimes it's just refusing to bow." As she turned to leave, he called after her, "Wait." When she faced him again, his voice was quieter. "The lawsuit. It's dropped," she blinked. "What?" "I'm not going to destroy someone for telling the truth," he said. "At least not anymore." Nina's expression softened. "Then maybe you're finally earning the respect you've been demanding." Ethan exhaled slowly. For once, he didn't have a comeback. When she walked out that night, cameras flashed outside, reporters waiting, eager for a statement. She said only one line before disappearing into the city lights. "No one is untouchable when you stand up for yourself." Back inside, Ethan stared at his reflection in the darkened window. The world saw him as a monster, and maybe they were right. But something about Nina Clark's quiet defiance had cracked his armor, and for the first time in years, he wondered if maybe he deserved to change. The following week, the tension in the city reached its peak. Every business channel, gossip site, and morning show talked about Ethan Ward's downfall and the waitress who stood her ground. Some called it poetic justice, Others called it the fall of a tyrant. But behind closed doors, Ethan was different. The once feared billionaire who barked orders and walked through life untouchable was silent now. His reflection in the mirror showed a man he barely recognized, tired, bruised by his own pride. For the first time in years, Ethan cancelled his luxury trips, skipped the board meetings and spent his mornings at the park, alone. The people who used to hover around him for favors suddenly vanished. He was left with the one thing he'd never faced before: his conscience. One evening his phone buzzed. It was Marcus Hale, his longtime business partner. "Ethan, we need to talk. The board is considering a vote to remove you as CEO. Public image is killing us." Ethan exhaled deeply. "Maybe they should—" "Excuse me? I built an empire out of arrogance, Marcus. Maybe it's time it stands on something else." Marcus was stunned into silence. Ethan hung up and opened his laptop. He typed for hours, crafting a statement that wasn't written by PR teams or lawyers, but by a man finally ready to own his mistakes. The next morning, the world woke to a shocking headline: Ethan Ward resigns as CEO, donates $40 million to Workers' Rights Foundation. In a live press conference held at the same ballroom where he once flaunted his power, Ethan stepped up to the microphone. The crowd buzzed, cameras flashing, journalists ready to dissect his every word. He cleared his throat. "For years, I believed success meant control. I believed wealth made me untouchable, but I was wrong." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Ethan continued, voice steady. "A few weeks ago, a young waitress reminded me that respect is not demanded, it's earned. Her name is Nina Clark, and while I can't undo what I've said or done, I can start listening to the people I once ignored." He paused, scanning the crowd. "Today, I'm stepping down as CEO of Ward Global. My shares will fund programs that protect service workers, people like Nina, who make this country run while people like me take them for granted." Gasps echoed. Flashbulbs went wild. A reporter shouted, "Is this redemption, Mr. Ward?" Ethan gave a small, tired smile. "No, this is accountability." Across town, Nina stood frozen in front of her TV. She had just finished her shift when a co-worker shouted, "Nina, you gotta see this." There he was, the man she'd once faced down in a crowded restaurant, now admitting his arrogance to the entire world. Her throat tightened as she watched him say her name with genuine respect. Her mother, Evelyn, stood beside her, wiping her eyes. "Baby, he finally got it." Nina nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe he did." A few days later, a small black car pulled up outside Nina's diner. When the door opened, Ethan stepped out. Not in a designer suit, but in a plain grey shirt and jeans. No cameras followed him this time. Nina was serving coffee when she looked up and froze. The diner went silent. He approached her table slowly. "Nina," she raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Ward, didn't think I'd see you here again." He smiled faintly. "Just Ethan now. No titles, no boardrooms." She folded her arms. "What brings you here?" He gestured to the empty seat. "May I?" She nodded reluctantly. He looked around the small diner, taking in the warmth, the laughter, the life. "I used to think people respected me because I was powerful. Turns out they feared me. There's a difference." Nina tilted her head. "And now?" He met her gaze. "Now I'd rather be respected for being decent." A soft silence followed. The waitress who had once stood up to him now looked at him with something new, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. "You've come a long way," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "You showed me the way." Before he left, he placed a small envelope on the counter. "It's a fund for your mother's medical care. No strings, no pity, just gratitude." Nina hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Thank you. But for the record, you didn't need to buy redemption. You earned it by facing yourself." He smiled back. "Guess we both learned something about humility." Months later, headlines would tell a new story. Former billionaire Ethan Ward opens foundation for service workers. Waitress Nina Clark joins as director of outreach. Their paths crossed again, not as employer and employee, not as billionaire and waitress, but as equals. And in the same ballroom where arrogance once ruled, they stood together before a crowd of workers and families, launching a movement built not on money, but on respect. Nina took the mic and said simply, "Power can silence people, but kindness makes the world listen." The crowd rose in applause. Ethan looked on, proud, humbled, and finally, human.